Welcome to In the Know. The Pelicans are on a massive losing streak. Here to talk about it, me and Mason just gonna let it all out. Talk about what's going on. Why aren't they winning games? What are they going to do with the trade deadline? Are they even going to make it to their game in Dallas? All that and more. Before we start, this podcast is sponsored by Birdsall Law Firm, the official injury lawyers of Boot Crew Media, located at 918 Poydras Street by the Superdome. Give them a call at 504-523-5413. If you or someone you know has been involved in an accident, make sure you mention we sent you. That's Birdsall Law Firm, the official injury lawyers of Boot Crew Media. I need them injury lawyers to come lawyer up about the injuries that the Pelicans have going on, because they are in the midst of a 9-game losing streak. Brandon Ingram has come back. He's played 3 out of the 4 games since he's come back. He played 2, sat out on the second night of a back-to-back, did not play that game. Played against the Nuggets last night. Has not looked like himself in any capacity, way, shape, or form. And the Pelicans keep sliding. Mason, how are you handling all of this? What are your thoughts? Let it all out. Let us hear it.
Man, first on the injury thing, did you did the local broadcast air last night, or was it just TNT?
I just watched the TNT one.
It's like Stan Van Gundy went in, and like he went to bat for New Orleans. I've always thought it was interesting when Stan Van Gundy talks about the Pelicans, because I think the point of comparison is always Mark Jackson with talking about Warriors games and him kind of feeling a little bit bitter afterwards. And Stan's like the opposite. Stan is like very positive about the Pelicans, and he said a lot of things to like caveat why they're losing with all the injuries. But he's like, they just can't stay healthy. They can't keep stars healthy. Like the terminology, the way he actually said it, the Pelicans cannot keep their stars healthy, which just like felt like a shot at the med staff just with the way he phrased it. Because I don't know, I thought that was really interesting way he worded that, because you can say like it's the injuries have been the problem without saying they haven't been able to keep players healthy. And so I don't know, just a random aside that I thought about when you were mentioning the injury lawyer, the lawyer thing. But no, it's been not great. It's so wild to think that I witnessed the last win for the Pelicans.
It was
in Detroit against the Pistons. That's the last time the Pelicans won a basketball game. And so
holy crap.
Wow. Yes. Something to think about. The Pelicans are on cleaning the glass in the league summary. They show the overall, and they show the last 2 weeks. The Pelicans are the second worst team in net rating in the NBA over the last 2 weeks, ahead of only the miserable San Antonio Spurs. So that's not good. And it is frustrating because we were talking right before the show started. I know Ingram's been out for most of it, but this team now with Ingram is, in theory, the exact same team that closed out this regular season last year and played a really hard-fought series against the Phoenix Suns last year. And so they just need Brandon Ingram to get back round into his prior form, and the team just needs to, like, I don't know. It just seems like we're watching a different team with the same players versus what we saw down the stretch last season. And again, small sample size because Ingram's just getting back and missing him and Zion's a problem. But yeah, curious what your take is, especially in the more recent games where we're seeing Ingram back with this team, and what's different.
Man, I mean, first and foremost, Brandon Ingram is different, right? He's not himself. He's has almost as many turnovers as made baskets. He's offensively just not been there, defensively just not been there. And I think everybody understands that when you miss 2 months, 29 games, it's not unreasonable to expect a level of rust, an adjustment period, a ramp-up period. I don't think anyone's taking that away from him. But the point remains is that's a compounding issue of him missing that much time. First of all, him missing that much time hurts you. And then the time it takes for him to adjust also hurts you. And that's got to be part of the calculus when thinking about long-term team building around another star who faces similar time and ramp up concerns, right? Every time Zion's come back, I mean, I guess he hasn't been on burst minutes for a long time, but there's always an asterisk when Zion comes back. And whether that's like, oh, we're just not going to let him do the point guard stuff yet because he's got to get back into the conditioning, or whether it's him looking like a traffic cone on defense, because that often happens with Zion too, right? It takes him a while to get back into game shape, and most noticeably, you see it on defense. So when you're building around these two guys, like something's got to shake. That's got to be part of the long term future. Now, if you're wildly optimistic that hey, these are just freak accident, one off things, they can power through it, then maybe you don't account for it. But that's something I personally have started to think more and more about. I think a lot of people started to think more and more about when evaluating the pairing. And then two, specifically regarding like what's different with this team, man. I'll be honest, it just seems like offensively there's just no plan. There's no cohesive purpose. Like the entire identity is like defensive based. And credit to them, they've done a really good job on defense, and particularly in the half court. Even I don't know what it is now, but like when it was like 8 straight losses in a row, it was after the Milwaukee game. They were during that stretch, they were 30th in offense, and they were 5 points away from 29th, 5 points per 100 away from 29th. So they were like 30th by a mile, like not even close. And then they were 13th on defense and like 9th in rebounding. And, if you consider how many bad turnover games they've had or just bad games in transition, the fact that we're just 13th in defensive period is a testament to the fact that their defense has been rock solid, like all year, no matter what. Sure, you have outlier games here or there. Every team does. No one's perfect defensively every year. And I see this like rim protection stat floating around like, oh, Pelicans are the worst rim protecting team. And it's like, I get it. But like, if you look at how they defend schematically, they bring their bigs away from the basket. Especially when Larry's out there, he's just switching everything. There is no rim protection, and their defensive identity is based on the fact that they're not going to let you get to the rim. And they're one of the best teams in the league at preventing you from getting to the rim. Their rim deterrence is actually really, really good. They're good at forcing turnovers. They're one of the best teams at generating steals, and so they have other markers of a really good defense. It's just people love to focus specifically on one thing, and sure, that'd be a welcome addition to the team. I'm not going to say that here, the Pelicans don't need rim protection, but it's not, the root cause or the fix all that's going to like make them start winning games. It's not the defense. It's the fact that they can't score the ball. Last night against the Denver Nuggets, they had their best offensive game in a long time. The offensive rating that game was 111.9, which would have been 25th for the league, 25th amongst all teams. So it just goes to show you it's not a good offense. And to compound that, the offense, when Brandon was on the court, the offensive rating was 97. And it's just like the bench was doing the lifting, and the starters, again, just could not get it going. So in terms of, like Brandon's not been playing up to his usual self, that contributes to it. But it just seems to me offensively, the staff doesn't really have control over what Brandon Ingram and CJ McCollum are doing. It's just like, hey, you guys are very talented players. We pay you a lot of money. Go do stuff, make stuff happen. And that is their responsibility partially. But from a coaching standpoint, it just seems like they're freestyling out there into just mid-range shots, which is their comfort zone. And they're not choosing to attack mismatches. They're not creating advantages for other players. There was a moment last night where at the end of the half, CJ had a little step back mid-range shot that he made. Meanwhile, Trey was open in the corner for about 15 seconds, and you can hear him clap, like, get me the ball. And CJ just does not see him, blinders on. And it's like, yeah, CJ made that shot. He's been shooting 38% from mid-range this season, which is a horrible efficiency. Herb Jones has been more efficient from three on a points per possession basis than Brandon Ingram from mid-range. And Brandon Ingram had like another one last night, and I posted it, and people like just were like, oh, this is his shot selection. He had one last night where he's coming off a double screen. He gets it, is in prime position to attack Jokic downhill. Jokic is completely flat-footed. He doesn't engage Jokic at all. Just pulls up for a 19-foot mid-range shot, 20-foot mid-range shot. Just completely lets the defense off the hook. And it's like, this is terrible offense. This is like, I understand you're paid to make that shot. Yeah, but most of the time you can get that shot whenever you want. And if you can really attack a guy who's not a known rim protector, a guy that, Herb Jones has been attacking all night and like putting you in the bonus and getting to the free throw line with, like, there's no reason you should settle for that shot at that time. And there just really needs to be an organizing force for the Pelicans offense. And for a long time, that was Zion. And frankly, we haven't seen that like all together, because like when they were all together, like it definitely seemed like Zion was secondary to BI and CJ in terms of like the looks that he was getting, the touches that he was getting. But when those guys were out, like it became very clearly Zion's team. And the hope was when everyone got healthy, it would remain that way. Zion first. He initiates things, he creates the advantages, creates the holes, and everyone else kind of fills in when they need to. And then you rely on the tough shot making of BI and CJ when things get really, truly tough to like blow the wall open that they're going to build for Zion. But just doesn't seem like there's any cohesive principle offensively. And that's a complaint that I have had since last season in that they just work so hard to generate their looks. They just don't generate easy looks all that often.
Yeah, it's I don't know. I'm trying to like watch some of the other stuff that's going on, and like what the Ingram's return has done to the rest of the rotation and roles and things like that. And I feel like it's kind of been a mixed bag. Herb had a really good game last night. I think you've mentioned it. He's in, he can play. When he can play off stars like what he was doing last night, and not just be a spot up guy, but somebody who's actually moving, the good activity he was showing, I think that was nice to see. Larry Nance played a great game, but I look at also on the other hand, guys like Najee. It feels like, I don't know, kind of feel like Najee has gotten lost in all the shuffle over the last few games, and he's not. I know he came back from injury, but he hasn't been the same guy. Who was really a strong offensive and defensive force for this Pelicans team when they were missing guys. And so I do feel like to a large extent, it's about exactly what you're saying. The offense seems kind of listless. It's, go make shots, shot makers. But I think that also has a trickle down effect to the roles of some of the other guys on the team. And if there's not really a cohesive game plan on the offensive end, that's going to create additional problems when you're mixing up rotations and then trying to reintegrate guys to playing with each other. So I think, maybe before Najee would be one of the lead playmakers, and especially if he came back in with bench units, be that guy. But now he's coming alongside BI or CJ, even those bench units. And so I think there's some current concerns too about the roles players are kind of assuming when they're coming back or when they're playing with guys that maybe they haven't played with in a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, like, I don't know. We can belabor this point endlessly. So I think you summed it up really nicely there. I think the one last thing I want to touch on regarding that is Devontae Graham still getting minutes. So
not Kyra, just minutes. The very first guy off the bench last night. Like that was
Kyra, bless his heart, got sent to the G League during the homestand, where they probably could have used him, right? And he didn't play too well up in the G, and that is what it is. And he comes back against Milwaukee, against a fully healthy Milwaukee, and he's going against Giannis, he's going against Brooke, he's going against Drew, he's going against all those guys. 7 for 10, puts up 15 points. Looks fantastic in transition. Just he had Joe Ingles looking like a statue out there, just flat-footed, slow as molasses. Now you're playing this team. Well, they asked Willie Green, about if Kyra's going to get some more minutes after this kind of performance, and I think he said, "Oh, yeah, it's something we're going to have to look at." And fast forward, next game, they're playing against the Denver Nuggets, who are completely lacking in terms of paint protection, rim protection. Specifically, their bench just does not have any kind of oomph defensively, and they don't want to run with you. Kyra gets 0 minutes. 0. And it's like, okay, well, this is the 13th pick. That's a complete waste of a pick at this point. Complete. And it's not, I'm not going to say it's like the front office's fault necessarily for making that pick. And it's certainly not Kyra's fault for getting injured and just becoming an afterthought in the rotation. But that's a resource completely unused, and it doesn't seem like it's going to get used anytime soon, unless there are very, very dire circumstances. And so, yeah, I mean, I hear it when people say like the Pelicans could have traded that 13th pick for a role player that would be playing right now, or literally anything. Like you just can't get minutes out of that person. Why?
Yeah, it's like it kind of feels like the conversation we had with Trey Murphy last year, except the problem is that Kyra isn't, he wasn't a rookie last year. He's coming up on, his next. He's got 1 year left, right? Or he's got 1 year.
He's extension eligible this summer. I don't think they're going to lock him to any kind of extension, but yeah, he's got 1 year left after this.
Yeah. So, it's disappointing that he's not given a chance to show what he can do, because they have to make that decision. We talked about this last episode, and obviously it hasn't changed much, and here we are talking about it again. So, maybe by next episode we can talk about something else, and because Devontae's been traded or something like that, because the deadline's coming up. So, lots to unpack there as well.
Speaking of the deadline, lots of players that the Pelicans have been tied to, rumor-wise. One person that we've discussed on this podcast at length. Actually, we've discussed all of these guys. There hasn't been a single guy we have not discussed at length.
Gary Trent, maybe not too much, but the rest of the guys we have.
Yeah. But yeah, John Collins is it seems like, one that's been part of the focus in terms of reporting rumors, etc. Recently, I think the reported trade package or offering was Devontae Jackson Najee with like no picks. Obviously, Atlanta is not going to say yes to that, and definitely has not said yes to that once the trade would have been done. But that kind of like illustrates the starting point, I guess, or a point of like, how comfortable the Pelicans are putting in real assets or whatnot. That'd be an absolute heist if they were able to pull that off specifically. How we talked about Collins, we talked about his potential at playing the 5. Do you still I guess where are you at now? Since we first discussed him on that initial pod, Pelicans have just been terrible. They haven't won many games at all. Mm-hmm. And so does your idea of what they need, is it different, and are you more on or off the John Collins bandwagon? Where do you stand?
I'd say a little bit more. The reason being that, look, you're seeing that a big hole. We've talked about the strengths and weaknesses of the Pelicans, even at full strength. We need to acknowledge the fact that one of their weaknesses is they can't stay healthy. Their stars can't stay healthy. And so I think the appeal of John Collins for this team has additional intrigue to me because of the injury concerns. Collins is a guy, we've seen it in his career. He can get you buckets. He can help you on the offensive end. When you have other guys out. And I think that is something that makes, the idea of him a little bit more appealing to me. I think the challenge.
So I want to push back a little bit here.
Okay.
Right.
Go for it. Yeah.
You could say kind of like what you just said about Jonas, right? He can get you buckets while other guys are out.
Yep.
Pels haven't shown a tremendous amount of interest in utilizing Jonas that way,
unless that's a fair point, yeah.
For a particular matchup. And John Collins has also fallen to the wayside in Atlanta because there's other mouths to feed, with DeJounte Murray entering the fray, Clint Capella being the primary role guy, role man, screener. And then, DeAndre Hunter, they also gave him big money, so they got to adjust for that. So is there any level of confidence that you have that Collins will be utilized more in a fashion that allows them to produce at a level where he did have that 21-10 year?
Yeah. I think I have less of a concern, although I've yelled about it, so I can't say it hasn't been a concern for me. But I think my concerns with Jonas mainly have been his minutes when the team is more at full strength. Do I think that they've let CJ try to cook when they should have just been playing through Jonas in the post before? Yeah, it was happening in the Pistons game that I was watching live down the stretch. They should have been going through Jonas. They were instead CJ just dribbling around and trying to do stuff. And while Jonas is sitting there with Nerlens Noel, and he was not getting the ball. So like that is clearly a concern for me. But I think at least with Collins, I would expect that Willie would trust him more down the stretch. If he's trying to go with the small switchy lineup, I think that maybe Collins would play more. And the second part of where I was going to go is that if the Pelicans want to maximize their title chances this season in the Collins trade, Jonas isn't the guy going out. I think it's Nance. And so like, I don't know, or if you're putting together that type of deal, because I don't see, if you get Collins, I just don't see a place for Larry Nance. Like, he's not going to be closing games anymore. It should be Collins, or else what are you doing trading for John Collins in the first place? And so I think you need Jonas and Collins to be able to kind of play different styles. Fingers crossed that there is an ability to adapt to styles. That I know we haven't seen that. So a lot of this is me assuming any sort of positive changes occur with the coaching staff, which I don't know if we have essentially necessarily the track record to suggest that. But that I would like to see one of the two bigs kept this season. If you're going to get Collins, I'd rather see Jonas kept. And then this offseason, you've got other questions to answer. But how do you see it?
Yeah, so I mean, like, again, assuming that reporting is accurate, it definitely doesn't seem like JV's part of the deal at this moment, at least. Maybe in the future, maybe in a different deal. So if you had a situation where it was JV, Collins, Nance, and then you have Zion, right? Doesn't seem like there's enough minutes for all of them. You got to cut it out somewhere.
Right.
I don't think you can just eliminate the JV minutes entirely. Like, he is a better player than Nance. Like, regardless of what Willie Green might think, I don't know if they actually think this, but he's a better player than Nance. You can't just cut those minutes, even if you just start John Collins at the 5.
Yeah.
And you're right that Collins is more of a super Larry, right? He's, in theory, maybe not as talented defensively, but certainly better on the glass, better scoring, better shooting, all of the other things. And it allows you to close small while still having rebounding on the floor, but you're still switching everything and getting just a little bit more offensive oomph. That's the appeal there. I don't think the coaching staff would see it that way.
Isn't it frustrating? Like, that's the challenge we're having here.
You're gonna see like JV just on the bench next to Billy Hernangomez and just probably cursing out people in their own languages. Billy in Spanish, JV in Lithuanian. And yeah, I mean, that's my expectation of what would happen, and then they would find a home for JV either this summer or maybe just in a different deal at the deadline.
And we'd be looking for a rebounding big. The trade market after we traded Jonas.
We sure would. A post presence, a rebounding big, someone that can handle the bigger
someone like
guys.
Jonas.
Someone like Jonas. So I mean, that's how I think of it. And I think part of that plays into. I'm a little lukewarm on Collins now because I need to see what the rest of the moves look like.
Sure.
And if I can, if the inevitable writing on the wall is this is going to be a JV less team, then I need to add shooting. And so, like, if I'm compromising the rebounding, if I'm compromising, that kind of scoring, then let me just lean in to offense that fits. And in my vision of offense that fits is putting more shooting around their athletes, allowing John Collins to dive and roll in space and run pick and rolls with Zion in a spread floor. So go, if you can. I think I posted something today and he commented on it that brought back John Collins and Gary Trent. And if, who cares about that specific trade? But if you walk away from the deadline and you're starting 5 with CJ, Trent, BI, Zion, John Collins, they're probably not going to rebound at a super high level. I think they'll be above average, to be honest. This is a good team, rebounding team. In general, they have been, but I'm sure the bigger teams will eat them alive on the glass, but who's going to keep up with them offensively? That's a very, very fast-paced offensive team, as long as CJ's not just slowing everything up.
Yeah. I think the one piece of the we talked about how Jonas maybe hasn't been utilized the right way. The one thing that's been disappointing to me on that front, especially recently, is that one of the big strengths of this Pelicans team to start the season, and this is with Zion healthy too, was their ability to be able to draw fouls and get into the bonus early. And so going away from Jonas, Jonas is a guy who can go and draw, create a mismatch and go draw a foul in the post. And I think that has value, especially as you get back guys like Ingram, who are regardless of how many shots they're hitting in the mid range, they draw attention. Defenses care about them, and they have an increased ability to pick up non-shooting fouls, to pick up fouls with if they're moving off the ball, if they're using the pick and roll to create mismatches. Like, I feel like that's something that we're not seeing right now, and that the way to really also limit opponent transition opportunities is to not brick shots and let teams get out and run. If you can get to the free throw line, even if you miss the second free throw, you're not going to create. Opponent's not going to create a transition opportunity out of that. And so,
the other thing is, if you never miss a shot, the opposing team never has a chance to rebound, and you will always win the rebounding battle, no matter what, unless they also go perfect. So just don't miss buckets, and they won't get any rebounds. I mean, it's that simple.
Yeah, right. And so, we've also seen Pelicans opponents push after made shots. The Pelicans make a shot, but when that doesn't happen is after a made free throw. That just there's no one's caught out of position in that situation. And so I don't know. I feel like the Pelicans could be doing a better job of generating fouls and trying to get into the penalty earlier, which then should help your defense. So just additional points of frustration with the game plan.
Okay, so we touched on John Collins. The other guy, I mentioned, and that was Gary Trent Jr. Reporting came out today that the Raptors would be looking at something like 2 seconds or a protected first to kind of make the deal work. That seems like a reasonable price if you think about it. He has a player option that he's most likely going to opt out of this summer. He's looking for big money. Reports say he's looking for 20 to 25 million annually. If you look at the kind of like shooters around his around his skill set, Norm Powell, Tim Hardaway Jr., even Duncan Robinson and Joe Harris, all of those guys got that kind of money. So it's not unreasonable for him to ask for that amount. I don't know, what he's eventually going to end up getting, but that seems to be the market for a starting two guard that can shoot, basically. And he, the 2 seconds thing was interesting to me, and I think it makes sense because, if you look at when Pelicans had Nikola Mirotic, he was an expiring contract. The best they could get was 4 seconds out of that. And so when players are effectively expiring contracts or looked at as 3 months rentals, the teams trying to trade them don't have a tremendous amount of leverage.
Tell us the Rockets with Eric Gordon.
The Rockets are just plain stupid, man. It took them 10 years to figure out Alperen Sengun is their best player, and they still don't really run stuff to him. Anyways, yeah, so I can see Trent Jr. being available for cheap, but if he's available for cheap, that just means other teams are also going to be after him. There's just a lot of teams bunched up in the West that are looking to claw their way out of this. It's just, I think he'd be a good fit. I don't think there's any disagreement about his fit. It's just are you willing to then pay him his next deal? And if you are, then how are you reshaping your roster to accommodate that?
Yeah. One little nugget that I think is interesting. I was looking at Real GM. The Pelicans
Island.
Wait, what?
Get it? Little nugget. Sorry. Anyways, continue.
Nice. I do get it. Nice. Sorry. Newborn parent brain dead right now. But the Pelicans have a shockingly small amount of second round picks to offer. So they're getting the Bulls in 2024. Their 2023 goes to Atlanta if it's worse than 45. So which obviously you hope that, but maybe who knows at this point. Their 2025 second rounder is going to Memphis. The 2027 second rounder is going to Portland. They've got to swap with someone for 2026. But anyway, I say that because there was this conversation that around the Lakers' recent trade and giving up multiple second round picks to the Wizards. And right now that's a that is a finite resource to a degree. You can't just go buy one in the middle of the season, right? That usually happens around draft time. So
the Pelicans had 3 this past draft. They had 3, and the one they ended up taking 55 was Carlo Matkovic. EJ Liddell they used one on, and the third one I believe they sold, and they got Sebron and undrafted stuff. So I think it was, or they traded for like Indiana. I don't know what they did. They did something with it.
Yeah. So, so they've got, right, as far as what they have available to trade, they've got 2024 from Chicago and then 2026 and I guess 28. So they don't have a ton of seconds to trade. So if that's, and, if they want to go after Trent and trade a couple seconds for him, I still think, I would happily do that, but just worth noting that they don't have a lot of like additional seconds to throw at trades and stuff.
Yeah. But could you get like, a second round pick for Billy Hernangomez and just slide him into someone's trade exception that's looking for. Yeah, I think they have ways of like generating those seconds at any at any point they need to. But you're right that there's not a lot of liquidity here at the moment.
Yeah. What you mentioned in the Collins proposal that including Najee in a trade like that. What do you think because that was I heard Zach Lowe's proposal Bones for Najee. What do you think his like market value is? What do you like? Other NBA teams to like what would you give up for Najee?
I'm going to answer your question with another question. Is Jay Crowder worth more or less than Najee?
I would give up more for Najee than for Jay Crowder, some dude that's been sitting at home for months and already looked like he was declining last year.
The counter argument is that Jay Crowder is like
playoff experience and
played in the finals multiple times and et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, I think they're comparable players at this juncture. You know what you're getting out of Najee 9-9 out. You know what you're getting out of Jay Crowder 9-9 out theoretically. They're both like hustle guys, energy guys, culture guys.
Brick for both. Brick threes for like 4 straight games and then makes it rain the 5th. It's pretty much.
Yeah, exactly. The difference is Najee, I think, is a lot better at putting the ball on the floor and a lot better at playmaking. And I think Jay Crowder's probably better at rebounding, but we don't really know. So, I think he's got to be looked at as like a rotation player at the very least. I don't think he's going to fetch a first outright, but sheesh. Yeah, I could see a contender like if I don't know, is Bones Highland worth a first outright? Because if you do a Bones for Najee trade, then the transitive property is worth a first. So maybe like the 28th pick in the draft. Who knows? I would suspect his value is more in the line of 2 to 3 seconds or 4 seconds, which is he's more valuable to us than he is to you type of deal. I don't think the Pelicans are going to do much for 3-4 seconds. Obviously, they can go use those seconds to go draft the next Najee, but they kind of need a Najee type player right now because they're losing a lot of games.
Right, you need to trade him for a player. I don't see any scenario where it would make sense for the Pelicans to trade Najee for a pick or anything like that. Yeah. Anyway, good problem to have, right? That's not. We didn't think he'd be part of the rotation to start the year. So
yeah, if he's the sweetener that like makes a deal work. That's a really good problem to have. It's kind of found money, especially from an undrafted player. But yeah, dude, they're just in such a bad spot, and the trade deadline's rapidly approaching. And it's kind of difficult to predict how the market's going to shake out at this time. Just the Knicks are the team that's willing to give up 3 firsts for OG Anunoby. You guys know what kind of picks the Knicks have?
They're all so terrible. Protected. Yeah.
They're so terrible. It's like, yeah, okay. None of this is worth the Lakers pick, which, by the way, the Pelicans could end up in a situation where their own pick is worse than the Lakers, and there's no swap that's occurring, and their own pick has a shot for Wembanyama just because of how weird the standings are, and the Pelicans just aren't winning right now. They just desperately got to get back on track. So, this is the part of the podcast where I'm going to transition to like more long-term stuff. Kind of touched upon it earlier in the podcast. When I talked about, hey, when you're looking at Zion and BI, you got to figure out like if this is what you want to build around. I don't think there is any trade available at this deadline for one of those players. And again, I have to supposedly put a disclaimer out here for the people that are don't understand things well, but I'm not looking to trade either of them. I'm not shopping either of them. I'm merely discussing the prospect of building a team around two frequently injured folks. And if you had to look the other way, what do you do? And I don't think even in this world, like you move either of them at the deadline. But I do think this summer, there is a little bit more of a conversation depending on how the season plays out. I can see it going a few ways. One way is Zion comes back, they're all healthy, they go into a really good playoff run, and there's no need to ever have this conversation again, right? Whatever injury concerns for either of them were they had this season, they're in the past, they had a good playoff run. You know what you need to add around those guys. You move forward, without any question. That's one way it could shake out. Another way it could shake out is they just have a disappointing season, whether, maybe they miss the playoffs. Maybe they're in the play-in and they just don't even make the playoffs. Maybe they fizzle out in the first round. I think in those scenarios, conversations about the future as a duo need to be had. Not saying moves need to be made, but a conversation needs to be had. And in my opinion, this summer is probably the peak value you can extract for Brandon Ingram relative to his contract. Here's why. He's extension eligible this summer. He is entering his third anniversary of his deal. He'll be able to add 3 more years onto his deal. So you'd have 2 left. You'd be able to add 3 on top of that for a total of 5, 3 with the new money, with the new raises. And typically players don't agree to that unless they have made an all-NBA team. And that new money is real big new money. Kind of like Towns and Booker. And so typically players will wait for their 4th anniversary when they have 1 year left on their deal. And I think those guys I could be wrong, man. I think those guys had options, and that's why on their contracts, and that's why it was, they agreed in the 3rd year. But typically a player like Brandon will wait till his 4th year, 1, giving him another opportunity to make all NBA, to be eligible for that thing. 2, it adds 4 additional years of the big money onto his deal rather than just 3. So it's just more money all around. So I don't anticipate them agreeing on an extension this summer, but generally when you get to that 4th year, that's the following summer, not this summer, you have a choice. Either you agree to an extension or you don't. And when you don't, the jig is up and the player's value just plummets precipitously in terms of a trade. He enters unrestricted free agency. Your options become limited. Sure, you can get a lot, but you get a lot more this previous summer. And I think any deals for stars at the deadline by nature are just diminished in value. Like I don't really like doing star deals. If you look at all the star deals that have taken place at the deadline, you're like, he went for what? He went for that much. So
Boogie.
Exactly. Boogie. Even look at CJ, right? The Sabonis Halliburton thing was interesting. And that's I think best case scenario, but
neither guy I don't think was perceived as a star at that time with Halliburton and with Sabonis. But
sure, yeah. And so with Brandon specifically, his peak value is at this summer. Are you entertaining this just idea of all right, we just go in a different direction to build my preferred way if they decide to sever the partnership between those 2 players? I'm not saying they should, if they decide to do that, the player they should build around is Zion. And I don't think that should be a controversial take. I think his highs are higher, and you can accommodate one guy missing games because he's giving you when he gives you when he's back is just astronomically high that it's worth trying to build around. And so they should try to build around Zion, and they should look to improve the team around him if they decide to sever that partnership. But that's where I'm at. What are you thinking about this potential situation?
Last point first. I agree that if forced to choose one to build around, it has to be Zion. I mean, he's what he does on the basketball court is not something that's replicable. I mean, we've seen it this year, just the tear he was on until he hurt his hamstring. I don't think I'm as close as you on the on as far as Ingram and considering moving him. I certainly I think like you said, you've got to let the season play out. I think you have to acknowledge the fact that these 2 guys haven't played together. It's the same. It's like time is a circle. We're talking. I remember it feels like just yesterday we're having this conversation with the Dell Demps era team of Drew, Eric Gordon, Tyreek Evans, Ryan Anderson, and Anthony Davis. It was the sky was the limit for that group And I buy that. I still buy that. I think that team in the era they were playing in was very appealing as far as the different ways they could potentially beat you, but they were never healthy together. You never saw it. And so I think I've been burned enough by those aspirations of what could be with stars and with your core players long enough to be more willing to entertain a change if you don't have the, if you don't have the ability to prove that these guys are going to be able to play together when it counts. That said, I'm not, I certainly do want to see the season play out. And even even if things don't go the way we want, I'm still probably not at a point where I'm actively looking. I would, if there was a guy out there that the Pelicans thought was available, a star level player that they believed was a better fit and would be a more reliable player from a health perspective, sure, you have to entertain it. But I think the last thing I'll say on this is that there is the Pelicans have done such a fantastic job over the last year in building a culture and building a group of players who want to be in New Orleans. And look, that could all be lip service once the team falls on hard times, right? And players are bitching about their roles, things like that. But I do feel like Brandon Ingram, yes, but I do feel like Brandon Ingram was that first guy who really, started the Pelicans that we knew up until this losing streak. Like I feel like he did buy in to New Orleans, to the city, that the fan base loves him. The injury delay notwithstanding. So I feel like there is that element to consider. And it would influence to a smaller degree my decision-making process on moving him. But yeah, so that's all I'll say. A lot of things to consider. I don't think you're out of line by any stretch in thinking about this because, again, they haven't played. I think Zion and Ingram have not played enough together for us to be confident in that being a consistent, reliable path forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think your take is fair as well. I think my threshold for moving him is I think a little bit lower than yours in terms of I'm not necessarily looking for an established star. If one is available, that's great. I think that would always be the priority.
Dorian
My
Finney-Smith.
team.
Yeah. I know you're talking to Seth today, or you already did. So.
That. I'm on Seth Partno's show this afternoon here shortly. Anyways, yeah, I mean, I think my team building philosophy is always get as many star players as possible, and part of that includes keeping Brandon Ingram. So my priority would be to extend him this summer if possible, lock him into that. I know it's only 3 years, but that would be my priority, get him on that extension first. But if that's not possible and Detroit came calling and they have a top pick, and let's say it ends up being not Wembanyama, and they build an offer around that top pick, I'm listening because that's my pathway to another star, right? If Charlotte comes calling and they get not Wembanyama and it's the Scoot pick, but they want to be good because their ownership, MJ wants them to be good. Mitch Kupchak drafted Brandon Ingram. That's his guy, right? I am listening to that. I'm not saying I'm pulling the trigger. I would have to see the other components of the deal. But if there's pathways for me to get star level talent that's indirect, I'm listening to it. Likewise, when the Paul George deals happened, the first one, he went for Sabonis and Oladipo. Indiana kind of made a bet on those two young guys. Both of them ended up developing into all-stars. Oladipo had a phenomenal year, made all-NBA, all defense, and then, his knee just completely gave out on him, and he hasn't been the same. And Sabonis has been a rock-solid all-star his whole career, and is having a wonderful year this year for the Kings. That's a model I'm willing to look into, as well as the second Paul George deal, which is they got a young up-and-coming guy and a bunch of picks. And I don't think Ingram's going to command the level of picks that Paul George got at that time, especially because part of it was the Clippers needed that deal to be done to get Kawhi. There was a bit of leverage there that the Pelicans are not going to have by identifying maybe who the next SGA is going to be. tougher, easier said than done, right?
Yeah.
But that's a model, and likewise, like the Sabonis deal, where it was like Sabonis for Halliburton, and you got like a very clear, young, upcoming guy that fits your team and that kind of ethos. Like that's what I'm looking for, because I'm looking at the stars who are available, and it's like, well, Towns might be available. He's on the supermax. He's gonna be making $60 million.
Yeah.
I don't think I want to invest in that next to Zion, and I'm not entirely convinced he's better than Brandon. Okay, he's off the table. Trae Young might be available. That makes me uneasy. He might be a better player than Brandon, but that there's just not going to be any defense on the court.
Right.
And guys, you have to consider the fact that players just don't like Trae Young. That's why John Collins wants out of where he's going. And so, okay, that makes me uneasy. And who was left? Was it DeJounte Murray? Is Atlanta going to give up the guy they just gave up a bunch of picks for? Is that does that make you satisfied? I don't know. Damian Lillard, Bradley Beal making the $60 million. I mean, like, first of all, Damian Lillard, he's a very, very good player, and like if CJ wasn't on this team, like that's a conversation I'm more willing to have. But CJ's on this team, and I don't think you're getting rid of that contract anytime soon. So it's just difficult to go down a list of stars who might potentially be available and find the established.
I'm confused. Are you making the case to or not to trade Brandon Ingram?
I'm saying that the model for looking for an established star is going to prove difficult.
Yep.
And so the case to trade Brandon Ingram would be to get younger. And by younger, I'm not saying Brandon's old. I mean younger contractually. Looking at first contract guys going into their second contract rather than third contract guys, or guys going into their third contract or fourth contract. Like that's what I'm talking about. And you just kind of reset your tax status a little bit around some of the younger players, hoard more assets, and then find the next Brandon type player who becomes available and trade your assets for him.
I can't get there. And I feel like, so if there's a guy they can trade, I'm not in the camp of going trade for even like, if you can make the case that the assets you're trading for are equal in value to Brandon Ingram, I have a problem telling CJ we're going to take a step back, to be better in the long term. I think that's a fairly hard sell. And I
don't think it's a hard sell if the guy doesn't play games.
Yeah, I don't know. I think teams look at star player, look at the ceiling for those players, and I think that's kind of more of the thought process. And like if the guys get pissed at BI because BI is not playing, that's one thing. But like I don't see that as reality. I think that I'd rather have BI, a star, whatever you want to call him, like obviously if you want to call him a superstar, a legit star that that wants to be in New Orleans. He plays a position that the Pelicans have historically had a really hard time finding. I'm going to ride with that guy, even if you tell me that his peak value is going to fall off a little bit after next summer. I would rather ride with him than trade him for like a pick that you're planning to turn into something else. Like I just think
I get it. I think they would have to fill the roster with other things. They would have to, like, let's say you went and got John Collins. It's like, okay, you need to add enough like win now players in the meantime to bridge the gap to justify that. So like, if you're doing a Detroit thing, it's like you've got to be getting Bojan and other people as part of that trade. It's like, okay, yeah, you're not getting Brandon, but you're getting a guy who is 6'7" and can score and can give you at least, like a fraction of the production that Brandon's doing. If not better shooting, but less, like playmaking and all the other stuff. And so, yeah, like it's not a complete, like, let's just go young and let's just like, lean into this next guy. But you have to find a way to find productive players producing now that'll still make you a good team in the regular season. Because I do believe a Brandon-less team with Zion healthy and all, like, like some key role player additions can still probably win 50 to 55 games in any given season if you get enough health out of Zion. But that's a big if.
It's a huge if, right?
That's a big if.
Like these last couple of games with BI getting back into the fold, notwithstanding, like I think that one of the things that you saw this season was even without one of the stars, the Pelicans were built in a way that they could stay afloat and be not just afloat, but be decent. And so, hopefully that we right the ship with BI and he starts getting back into form and the Pelicans look like the same Pelicans team that closed out last season without Zion. But I think if you go there, I'm looking at Dallas and I'm saying, okay, well, when Luka doesn't play, that team's like a dumpster fire. And Zion has much less, makes me less confident from a health perspective than Luka does. And so if that's the path you're going down, I'm not saying the roster would be as bad as Dallas's is without Luka, but it's a similar concern is all I'm saying.
Yeah, totally. And I think it's a completely understandable and fair. But I think we're all in this kind of agreement where Brandon, like we want Brandon to be on the team. We want him to be healthy and we want this partnership to work out. Like that's priority number one. So, yep. But people are going to take it as however they want to take it.
Look, I think your big message is 100% well taken that your two best players need to play to be the team that you want to be. And if you're in 3 or 4 seasons, then it's almost it's a little.
And they need to play like max players. Like when they are playing, they need to produce, and that's a separate conversation. Where I think Brandon will get back to that production, but it's just like they need to produce.
Yeah, and I do want to say this is probably a little unfair to Brandon in that a lot of this is because Zion is so unreliable to stay on the floor. Like if you had a star, let's say Zion had no injury concerns whatsoever, I think you can get by more with BI being less available. But
Mason, they did get by. They were first in the West until I understand where you're coming from, but they did get by. They were winning games without Brandon Ingram. They were doing their job, and he was let off the hook. Whereas in any other team in any other circumstance, I think people are severely underestimating what kind of went on with this kind of stuff. And if he was in any other market, he would have just been eaten alive by the media, by the the constant questions and all that kind of stuff. And I think Zion being Zion let Brandon go under the radar for a very long period of time, longer than than was necessary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah. So anyways, fun stuff in Pelicans land. I really, truly hope the next time we're recording, there's some kind of fun trade that we can talk about or, complain about.
Or a win. That'd be cool too.
Oh, I don't know, dude. I don't know what wins are like. They haven't won. Have they won in the new year? I guess they have won in the new year, but 3-13 in January. I can't remember the last time they won a game.
Yeah. It's no good. I'm not sure I can handle what we chatted about this morning. The Lakers potentially beating the Pelicans and tying them in the standings, like that game being the thing that does it. It's gonna be brutal. I'm gonna need a trade to help me cope.
Here's something that will help us at least entertain ourselves, albeit depressingly. I'm gonna leave you with a question: will Kyra supplant Devontae in the rotation before a trade happens?
No. No. What would make me think that if anything, he's getting minutes earlier in the game. Like Devontae Graham is now playing he was the first guard off the bench against the Nuggets. Like look, Willie's gone from starting Jackson to banishing from the rotation like a million times. So I'm not saying it can't happen, but I
don't know, man. When they made that CJ trade, Garrett Temple was still in the rotation and Devontae was still the starter until a few games after that. It took some time.
Yeah.
Oh my God. All right, that's all I got for you. But we do have a sponsor, wonderful sponsor called DraftKings Sportsbook. Are you ready for the biggest Sunday in sports? DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of Super Bowl 57, has all the Super Bowl action you need. New customers can bet just $5 and get $200 in bonus bets instantly. Plus, all customers can get in on the Super Bowl 57 excitement with DraftKings Happy Hour Super Boost. Check the DraftKings Sportsbook app every day between 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. EST to see what the prop bet will be boosted. I love the Super Bowl, so I'm definitely going to be betting on that thing football is my favorite sport. Download
diehard Lakers fan.
Diehard Lakers fan. Download this DraftKings Sportsbook app and use the code BOOT, BOOT. New customers can bet $5 on the Super Bowl 57 and get $200 in bonus bets instantly, only on DraftKings Sportsbook with the code BOOT. Minimum age and eligibility restrictions apply. Please see show notes for details. Anyways, folks, appreciate y'all listening.